So Roy, you're an audio engineer. You went to school for it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so there's the frequency bands, right? There's the frequency range from the low end, the low frequencies, then there's the mid range, and then there's the high frequencies. And some people call the high end. Some people call the low end the bottom. The mid range, there's a lot in the mid range. What's your before we ask Barry what his favorite frequency range is, what's your favorite frequency range?
My favorite frequency range?
The dumbest question to an audio engineer.
Well,
we're setting up Barry. Just say anything and then let's get to Barry's answer.
Well, I would say I pay the closest attention to the low mids because that's usually the most overlooked spectrum in music mixes that I've found.
Nice.
And that also reminds me of a interview on Bobby Ozinski's podcast where he was, where I think it was Andy Sheps that might have even said him, but I'm not too sure. But one of the episodes, they even said that's how you can tell if you have a good mixer or not, is how much attention to detail they give on the low mids. Ah, yes, and I agree with that. And so Barry's here with me in the studio. Of course, Barry's the old maintenance guy in my old. I should say he's not the old maintenance guy, although he is old. He's the maintenance guy in my old building. Barry, what is your favorite frequencies in this frequency spectrum?
The bottom.
The bottom, dude.
The bottom.
Gotta get that bottom, baby. Yeah.
The bottom.
Oh. All right. Well, you must have taken out your smartphone and actually leaned your elbow on it or butt dialed this podcast. I don't know how else you would end up here, but this is the Podcast Engineering Show, and this is episode. Oh, I said episode. Session 50. Oh. Yeah. Yes, 50! We made it to 50. 50's the golden anniversary, yes. And this is session 50. My guest today is Roy Stegman. I'm going to introduce him in a second, but thank you for listening to the show. Welcome. My name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for companies and authors and for the likes of Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet, as well as business authors. Every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk shop about the audio engineering side of podcast production. We don't get into the marketing and the downloads and the listeners, none of that. It's all about sound quality. I interview podcast producers, engineers, and other specialists. I actually have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and since I entered podcasting about 5 years ago, I've noticed a huge lack of audio skills in podcasting, and that's where this show can help, because I can bring all my music engineering background to podcasting, and I'm also producing podcasts. So it's a nice little marriage, and a lot of people find this show helpful. And if you just listen week to week, you'll just absorb all this extra knowledge. It's really cool. Deeper knowledge too. And some of it might, some of it seems over your head, don't worry about it, because subconsciously it went in there. If you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcast will sound a lot better, and you'll spend a lot less time producing them. Of course, Barry, you ready for the show, Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's right, he's ready. And a quick note, Podcast Engineering School is starting very soon. Actually, it might be this week. Sometimes I get confused with when we record and when it's going to be put out there. Let me check this real quick. Yeah, actually, this episode is posting on March 30th, and on April 4th, it starts. Podcast Engineering School starts finally. We're doing it online, and it's awesome. So go to podcastengineeringschool.com. I'm also going to be in Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky. I mean, that is like the hub of the U.S. People say New York, L.A. Please, Lexington has so much, right, Roy?
Oh, yeah.
Lexington. Like people talk about New York, L.A., Lexington. Come on. Anyway, the podcasting course is happening there April 21st to 22nd. Thepodcastingcourse.com. That's the website. What else? Is my intro too long, Roy? That's it. Roy Stegman is here.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Dude, you're in Florida. You live near Tampa.
Oh, yeah.
And we
Right
met
in the heart of Tampa, actually.
We hung out last month at PodFest. We had met last year at PodFest briefly, and this year we actually met again. We hung out, of course, with one of our sidekicks, Mark Johansson. And Mark, by the way, I have a personal message for Mark Johansson. Would you all please indulge me about a minute here?
Go for it.
Right, okay. Mark, I'm talking through the mic I bought from you, man. This is the vintage RE20. This is my first episode with my new mic. Well, it's new, but it's from the 80s or the 70s. We're not sure. But I bought this mic off of Mark Johansson at PodFest in Orlando. And Mark had this whole setup of all these different mics. It was a really cool setup. So podcasters could come and sit down and actually talk into I think there was 10 different mics. And you could actually talk and hear yourself and hear the quality of each different mic. And it was awesome. And before that, before PodFest, Mark was like, Chris, by the way, I'm bringing my vintage RE20 and I'm looking to sell it. So if you like it, let me know. And I was like, I'll let you know. So anyway, I ended up buying it. And this is it. So I hope it sounds good. Mark, what do you think, man? He actually Roy, listen, hold on. I got to say, Mark might kill me for this, but I got to say this. Roy, Mark calls me up about 4 days ago and he goes, hey, I'm listening to the episode you posted this morning. And, and I know you're not using the new mic yet, my mic, but something, your voice doesn't sound that good today or something like that. I was like, oh, man. But he said, look, I know I'm picky. I know we're splitting hairs. And right? Because that's what happens, Roy, right? Guys like you and I, we could sit here and, split hairs to the finest.
We could totally geek out.
Totally. So, Roy, you are a podcast producer. And your company is called CompleteAudioProducer.com.
That is correct.
And that's the name of your show, too. You do a podcast show. It's called The Complete Audio Producer. And you went to school for audio engineering. You actually produce audiobooks as well. And a couple other fun facts about Roy. He plays in a prog metal band. What's the name of your band?
Alpha Decay.
Alpha Decay. I see I should have had some audio ready to go. We could have played a little bit of it, Roy. Anyway,
I could probably send it to you later.
Well, just go on the web and type in Alpha Decay and find Roy's band. And
a good search term is Alpha Decay music.
Oh, really? Why? What? All kinds of quantum physics comes up otherwise?
Absolutely.
And also, you're learning German through this really cool app, right? And answer me in German, please. You're learning German, right?
Yeah. Yeah, diese App.
All right. And the name of the app is Duolingo. And so we were hanging out at PodFest, and we were in this. Where did we eat that one night?
I forgot the name
Applebee's?
of it. But I remember I was saying something like, ich bisschen eine kleine Deutsche.
Yeah, so we go into this place. I think it was an Applebee's. I can't remember. We go in. It's late at night. They're about to close. We're like, can we eat? And they're like, oh, my goodness. Okay, come on in. No, they were actually nice. So it's like 11:30 at night, and we're about to sit down and eat. And all of a sudden, Roy goes, oh, my God, wait, I got to do something. And we're like, dude, what? He's like, oh, I've been studying German through this app. I got to do my daily lessons. I've been doing it for 330 days. I haven't missed one day. And at the booth, he pulls out his app and he's sitting there talking in German into his phone and everything. That was pretty cool.
Yep, and I'm still keeping it strong.
Yeah, you still got the streak going? That's awesome. And so, of course, what did I do? I downloaded the app immediately, and I looked at the languages they offered. And I was looking for, what was I looking for? Mandarin. Because I love the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in the original Mandarin. I don't know why, I just like the way all that sounds. And so, but they don't have Mandarin, so I picked Danish instead.
Wow.
And I did that for one day, Roy.
Yeah, especially if you like to watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and hear their actual voices without subtitles to understand what they're saying. I could see why you would want to learn Mandarin.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do like listening to the Mandarin and with the English subtitles. I like that better than the overdubbed English. So like when their mouth moves and then it's like English speaking and it doesn't match up. I really don't. I mean, you can handle that, I guess, if it's a good movie, which it is. But hearing the Mandarin is much just nicer, right?
Yeah, and there's less of a disconnect because I notice that in and of itself is kind of a business, and sometimes they have one studio that does the voices, and sometimes they have 2 or 3 voice actors doing all the voices, and then when they send them to the States.
Right, right. And then, of course, the English that they overdub is never, like, really that good English. Like, the intonation.
Yeah, sometimes it's, lost in translation.
Yeah, like, the words they say might be a translation, but, like, the intonation and stuff is just not usually that accurate.
Yeah, one of the things I picked up, and that you'll pick up when you learn another language, is how the literal word-for-word translation might not make any sense at all. And sometimes it's a word order, and sometimes there's one word that would actually account for 2 words and things like that, which all of a sudden then, if you were to take the literal translation, you're like, what the hell does this mean? But,
right.
But if you understood the language a little better, you could probably translate for that, which I noticed that Google Translate's AI is pretty good at picking up on those things, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Google, they're making cars that drive themselves. Forget about it. Hey, before we get to the speed round, Roy, we're going to get to the speed round, and we're going to go over your equipment and workflow setup, how you produce your podcasts and how you produce your audiobooks. We're going to first do the speed round, which is we cover it really quickly just to get a basic sense of what you have. And then after that, we'll actually go back and we'll start from the beginning and we'll pick through it and we'll talk about each piece of gear and stuff like that. But first, one thing I heard about German is that they can sort of make words and just like append other words on the end of words. And so like you can have like a word that is literally like 15 words strung together. Is that true?
Oh yeah, totally.
So how does
I found a did I show you that YouTube video where the German girl was actually pointing that out in the German language?
Oh no. No, I saw the video where they're like, this is American. This is American. This is Dutch. This is Dutch. And this is Japanese. Oh, Japanese. And then they're like, this is German. This is German. Like the guy screams and it's like angry. Like German just sounds so angry and punitive, right? Anyway, what's the video you were talking about?
It's a video by this on the YouTube channel by this girl called Don't Trust the Rabbit. And but yeah, she has one of her recent videos. She actually talks about that, where she kind of points out the ridiculously long German words, and they're just almost like how we do conjunctions in English, but we don't do them as long as the Germans can do in their language, or because automatically we just in English we probably just see it as ludicrous if it's more than 2 words.
Right. Hey, here's that video. Here, can you hear this? This is how German sounds compared to everything.
Avion.
Aeroplane.
Aero.
Avion.
Flugzeug!
Surprise.
Surprise.
Sorpresa.
Sorpresa.
Überraschung!
Papillon.
Butterfly.
Farfalla.
Mariposa.
Schmetterling!
Stilo.
Anyway, that's just... Oh, man, that is funny. All right, so let's get to the speed round, Roy. You are recording your own podcast. Now, your podcast, The Complete Audio Producer, is that just you speaking, or do you actually interview guests and stuff?
The whole first season is me just speaking. This next season is going to actually have guests, and that's how I was talking about with having the format change each season. Like maybe the next one will be more of a roundtable type of show, kind of like this one. But yeah, right now, this next season is going to be one with guests.
Okay, so let's go over that. So right now, for the first season, you were just recording your own voice and then producing that for your podcast episodes. Let's start with that. Take us through the equipment. Then we'll get to the audiobooks after that. But just for your episodes, just talk us through like what you're about to record. What mic are you talking into? Where does the signal flow to? And just tell us all the equipment and the workflow.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll start with the simplest one, and this was when I first started doing it. I guess a while ago. But you could probably go to the website and check it out and get the dates. But the way the signal flow goes is that I have an SM57 with a pop filter on it, and I have it going XLR into the FastTrack Ultra USB interface preamp, and then I have that going through USB into my laptop, which is running Adobe Audition. After a while, the preamp started going bad, so then I added into the signal chain one of my trusty microphone preamps, the original PreSonus Bluetooth preamp, and I just have that bypassing the microphone preamp and the interface. So it's going, instead of it going straight into the preamp on the interface, I have it going through the Bluetooths, and the Bluetooth preamp going to the line in on FastTrack Ultra.
Got it. And then you record it in Audition.
That's correct.
Okay. And then after take us through the just overview, like the editing process and adding audio, whatever you do after that.
Well, after I record I guess to back up, one of the things I do I've tried this several different ways throughout the first season, where I would do notes first before I even turn on the mic, and then I would just go and get in front of the mic and just go kind of off the cuff, but still just keep it to the subject that I've written down in my notes.
Right.
And I've gotten much better results and a lot smoother by doing that process than just going all willy-nilly. I tried that a couple of episodes, and it was even more difficult for me to stay on subject, let alone just say anything. But once I get it recorded and tracked out and into Adobe Audition, and all the while I'm doing this, I'm also marking areas that I know I want to take out, or that I've made mistakes or things like that. Then when I go through and edit, I can just jump to those spots that I know that need to be fixed. And that makes the process a lot faster. That's something that I picked up when I was doing the audiobook recording. Then I go back and do one whole pass through, and if there's anything I want to add, I still have the mic available that I can just go and punch it in. And that's essentially how I do my episodes. I already have my templates ready to go with the intro and the outro.
Okay.
And that's very easy to template out. In fact, there's dozens of ways to do it in Adobe Audition.
Right. And then you just mix it down, and do you master it or level it, or what do you do when you make it an MP3, or before that?
I do all three. I mix it, make sure that the levels are consistent, because I know one thing that really, it's one of my little pet peeves that even some of my earlier episodes I know I'm guilty of, where you have really loud music, and then all of a sudden your talk goes very, very quiet, and then people have to turn up, and then all of a sudden when you close it, it's almost like that feeling when the outro music comes on real, real loud. Like, no, please don't.
Yeah, I'm dying. Yeah.
So I try and make it a little more pleasing to the listener by compressing it enough that that you don't have to play with the volume knob to be able to hear the person, and you're not going to be scared. Get crap scared by the intro.
That's funny.
And of course, I use the loudness meter that comes with Adobe Audition, which is actually the TC Electronics loudness meter plugin. And I use that to the EBU standard and just try and have it average to about -16 LUFS.
Right. And then you output it as an MP3 or a WAV file?
I output it as an MP3. Just most people, they go to 128K. I usually, just, since mine are a little shorter and I don't have to worry about it until it gets above 32 megs for my hosting, I just usually put it up to 192 kilobits per second.
Okay. Stereo? Mono?
Stereo.
Everyone was hanging on your answer, Roy.
Yeah, I wanted to draw out the suspense.
I know. Yes. All right. So then that's it. Then you just tag it and upload it, right?
Yeah, pretty much. In fact, I actually use the Blueberry plugin in WordPress to do a lot of the tagging for me, and just the unique stuff I type in, like the show notes and the description. Everything else is handled by the plugin once I publish.
Oh, through the PowerPress plugin? It'll actually add tagging information to the MP3 file itself?
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised by that because before then, when I was producing my podcast, when I was producing the Creative Economy Explosion podcast, it's one of the ones that I did a couple of years back. I would first tag it in iTunes, and then I would upload it, and then it would automatically. And at the time, it was replacing a lot of the tagging information as I was uploading it. So I was like, all right, so I might as well just eliminate the redundancy there.
Oh, I see. And so you're using Blueberry as your media host then?
I'm not using their host. I'm using their plugin. I'm actually using GoDaddy it as my hosting, but that I know that's that may change if I get more listeners.
Oh, I see. So you're hosting your media files on GoDaddy.
Yeah,
got it. So I didn't know PowerPress did that. That PowerPress could actually tag the MP3 right from PowerPress, which is a WordPress plugin. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I still use it, because otherwise you can, technically, you can still have your podcast hosted without using it, but the two reasons why I still use it is that, for one thing, it makes it easier for me to aggregate my listening, or at least somehow track my listening results, and then also it allows me to efficiently tag them as well.
Right. How does it help you track your listens?
It actually, you have to go onto Blueberry to create an account, but
I see.
It gives you the basic tally of listening, but in order to actually have them give you more specific numbers, like other than how many listeners, if you want to know more than that, then you would have to have them host your podcast. Otherwise, it's just going to say you had this many downloads, and that's a lot of times that's what I pay more attention to. So, well, who knows? Maybe in the future I'll go with Blueberry. Although Libsyn is seeming quite attractive too, because they seem to be killing it when it comes to syndication. Although Blueberry also helps you with that, and that's another advantage with the plugin, is that it'll help you syndicate it to several places, and of course has a special section for iTunes, so that makes it easy too.
Got it. Hey Roy, what's that noise? Someone's hammering, right?
Yeah, next door they're having some construction. I didn't know if the mic was picking that up.
Yes, little hammering noise on a podcast never hurt anybody. All right, so that's the speed round. Let's go ahead and go back through it. And so, your microphone is an SM57. I mean, this is just, talk about a classic mic to use. I mean, most vocalists and most like live music clubs, they use the SM58 as the vocal mic, but the 57 is, I think it's identical to the 58, right?
To a certain extent. I noticed that the major difference that they have with the SM58 is that it has a much more robust shock mount for being moved around, as well as it actually has the cage right over it to shield from breath. And that's the main reason why I have the pop filter in front of it. At one point I did have a SM58, but at the time the band was needing an SM58 all the time, so I was like, all right, fine, use that.
Right, yeah. So when you talk about shock mounting, the 58 has more internal shock mounting, right, within the mic itself.
Yeah, it's actually inside that cage that holds the diaphragm a little more still, so that way the vocalist can move the mic around if they're holding it by the hand. The SM57 is not necessarily meant to be held by a hand, although you see a lot of music videos where the singer is handling the SM57 with like a SM58.
Yeah, well, video's funny. They do all kinds of funny things. Someone just posted recently, there was some TV show, and they had two blue Yetis, one sitting in front of each speaker, and they were just sitting on the desk. They weren't even plugged in. Like, you could see where you're supposed to plug them in, and there was no wires because they were just for show. So that's what happens.
Yeah, I even saw a music video where the singer was actually singing into a kick drum mic. I mean, you look at it as like the classic AKG D12.
Oh, that one. Okay. I was going to say, because, some, you're right, the D12 and the D112, right? And so, but the RE20 is also used on kick drum mics a lot too. And that's what I'm talking into right now. And a lot of podcasters and broadcasters do.
Yeah, and I've seen it used on snares, especially for that 80s sound. I guess it's because of how it controls the proximity effect. It makes it easier for them to get a more low mid on the snares. Right.
So 57. By the way, an SM57, which is a Shure microphone. I've heard this. I can't remember if one of my guests on the show mentioned this or if I just knew this or this is common knowledge that it was actually made for the President of the United States.
I haven't heard that, but it has been used on the podium before.
Yeah, that's it. It was like made for the president, and he would always have two of them there. There's always two SM57s when the president speaks. I mean, at least there was for many years, probably from like the 60s up through maybe even now. I don't know.
Maybe. I know they like to put a lot more microphones up on there, and some news, some media, they also like to have their own microphone up on the podium too.
Yeah, that's when there's like a million mics.
Yeah,
in a row, and you're like, then you just talk. You don't worry about it. So, all right, the SM57 with the pop filter. You need a pop filter. I've actually tried speak. 'Cause I have a 57, which I've used for snare drums and all this other stuff too. And the 57, you're right, that the little metal, the mesh on the top that you speak into. On a 58, it's like a big, like almost like it is a windscreen. It's like a built-in windscreen. But on the 57, there's nothing. Like you can just, when you tap on the little top of it, it's like almost like you're tapping on the diaphragm, which you're not, but it's so sensitive. And if you speak close to that at all, any pee or any air that hits it is just distorts it completely. So definitely need a pop filter for an SM57. And now let's talk about this, your PreSonus Blue Tubes. This is it like a one rack space unit?
It's actually a half rack space. So you could actually fit two of them into a single rack space. And this was the older model where it's the dual servo circuit design. The newer ones are more Class A. Supposedly, some people find the Class A better design. Although personally, I like the sound of the dual servo circuit sound. Maybe it's just me.
And now, what's the general difference there between those two?
It's how they have the positive and the negative of the positive and negative side of every cycle. Dual servo actually has the amplifier going separate amplifier circuit for the positive and the negative, while Class A has the same amplifier for both.
That is so interesting. That so when the sine wave goes above zero, it goes through one amplifier, and when it goes below zero and dips down, it goes through a different amplifier.
Yeah. And what I noticed that the difference between the two designs is that the dual servo is more power efficient, while the Class A uses the same amount of power regardless of how much gain you give it. And that's kind of the thing that in a studio situation, we don't care. We just want the best sound.
Right. That's
so,
it.
Knows, maybe. Yeah.
That's the name of the game. So, all right. So I was trying to look up online to see a picture of it. I can't find a picture of it, but I'll find a picture and we'll put it in the show notes. And then you go through the FastTrack Ultra, which is an audio interface, which I actually have one, but it's back from, my goodness, 2009.
So that's right around the time I got mine too.
Yeah, all right, because I bought a MacBook Pro and I bought the FastTrack Ultra. Yeah. And it's made by M Audio.
That's correct. Oh yeah, and I forgot to talk about the UAD plugins that I use in my signal chain as well.
Well, yeah, so let's get to that. So you go through the PreSonus Blue Tubes into the FastTrack Ultra, which is, how many microphone inputs does your FastTrack Ultra have? Just two, right? 2 XLR inputs?
Well, this one has 4 for the preamp, but it has 8 total inputs. Just the last 2 are the SPDIF, which actually do have an amplifier that I use as a direct box, but it has SPDIF out, so if I want to use all 8, I can.
Okay. And SPDIF, of course, is a digital signal. It's input and output, a digital input and output.
Yep.
And I know our buddy Mark Johansson is all into digital in and out. Like anything he buys, he wants to make sure it has a digital in and out on it. Because if you're gonna,
then you can do more with them that way.
Yeah, and if you're gonna, if you want to keep the signal all digital, it does make it handy, because going from digital to analog and then back to digital, I mean, in theory, you're losing quality, or you're changing quality at minimum. If you're not losing, it.
because at that point you're you just introduce many more variables at the best, where you're at the mercy of how many analog digital converters you go through in the chain. It changes the sound. So that's the risk that you take when you have it go through too many at once.
Yeah, because each input and output is a chance for the signal to be degraded, to pick up extra noise, to lose clarity, or anything can happen. All right, so then you go into Adobe Audition, and here's the thing. You said when you're recording, you mark where you might want to make an edit. Now, is that while you're actually recording? Do you lean over to the keyboard and hit the space bar or something? Is that how you mark it?
Yeah, well, I have my finger right on top of the M, which is the key for putting a marker, and I actually have it over over the key as I'm talking. So when it's somewhere where I know I jumbled something up, or I thought of a better way to explain it, I just put a marker there and then say it the way I want it to be said.
Got it. That makes sense. And then once you've recorded in there and you're mixing it, then you do use some plugins. So let's talk about plugins.
Shall we?
Yes. Let's have some tea and talk plugins.
Well,
so what do you mostly use?
Seems like my bread and butter plugin that I like using on everything is the SSL E channel by UAD. I mean, I totally love how its gate works, where you can a lot of times the gate is a little harsh if you have it in gate mode, but you can turn it to an expander, which is a little more subtle, and it's more transparent in how it takes the quiet stuff and makes them quieter. And then after that, it depends upon how fast the person is talking. Sometimes in most cases, I just use the compressor that's in that channel strip plugin.
Okay.
But there are other times where I want a little more control over the dynamics, and then I just go through the legacy LA2A plugin that's also UAD. There are also some podcasts where I actually gain staged them both, where I used a little bit of the compressor that's in the E channel, but then afterwards I do a lot more of the squishing with the LA2A.
Yeah, the LA2A, man, the actual piece of hardware is just one of the most tremendous compressors ever made. But both of these, the SSL E channel, which, by the way, let me first say that SSL is a maker of mixing boards. Well, and they probably make other things too, but they're known for their mixing desks. And the E series was a series of mixing board, and then they had the G and the I, and they kept going after that. But the E channel, it's actually a board I worked on quite a bit at Soundtrack when I worked there.
Cool.
Studio E actually had an SSL E. I think it was I can't remember how many channels it had. Probably 60 faders. But anyway, so that's the E channel, and in the channel strip, so it's a channel strip from that mixing board, an SSL E console. It's a channel strip which has the dynamics, which is the gate expander, and then of course the compressor, and then of course EQ. And does it have anything else on there? I think that's it.
Well, it does have the phase swap, but when you're just recording one microphone, you don't need that. But it also has a filter right at the top where you can have it. You can do multiple things with it. I just usually roll off the bottom end because
I love those filters because you can just with one knob just roll off a little bit of low end, and you can roll off some high end if you need to. That's more rare, but
there's also a button on there where you can tell the filter just only filter the side chain to the compressor. So if you just want the dynamics to only pay attention to not pay attention to the I guess whatever you're cutting out,
Yeah.
you can do that and still have it come through when dynamics aren't doing anything.
Yeah, that is deep. I think everyone listening probably just went, whoa, what? Because that's like serious, in-depth side chaining, sending a side chain through a filter and all that. So let's leave that there.
Yeah.
So let me so you got the SSL E channel plugin, and then you have the legacy LA2A plugin. And like I said before, the LA2A is a classic compressor, which is, there's only two knobs on it, right? There's an input and an output.
2 knobs and a switch.
Right, wait, what's the switch? I forget.
The switch is either limiter or compressor.
Oh, there you go. So do you want to, how much, how severely do you want to compress it? So both of these are universal audio plugins?
That's correct.
Now, here's the thing. I thought you needed a universal audio, like you needed a piece of hardware to have their plugins, or you don't?
I do have a piece of their hardware. In fact, I have in my tower, I have the UAD1. And then when I heard about the UAD2 Solo coming out for the laptop, I was one of the first people to buy that. So I have the UAD2 doing most of the processing.
So wait a second. The UAD1 and 2, those are audio interfaces as well?
Nope, they're just signal processing.
Got it.
Like in fact, the UAD1. I have one of the ones where it's a regular PCI. They now have before they stopped making them, they also made them in PCIe, where they have the shorter connector into the board. But it's just basically a card that sits in your tower, and when you use the plugins, it has it do the processing in those for you. And,
right. So the idea of having an external processor unit like that, just to literally process and crunch the audio as you're using their plugins. The benefit of that is you're taking that processing load off of the regular CPU of your computer, and you're letting this external thing do a lot of the work for you. Therefore you can use more effects. Especially applicable in music when you have, let's say, 38 tracks of music and you want to use a compressor on 29 of them, and you want to use an EQ on 31 of them, and like the CPU power needed for that is insane. So that's why these things exist, where it's like an external signal processor that takes the load off the computer.
Yep, that's one of the primary advantages it has. Then it also uses a floating point architecture that's great for analog emulation. That's probably getting a little more geeky than your audience.
Well, no, I mean, I'm interested in that. So what is that? What is the floating point, and how does it make it sound more true?
Floating point is where they have an extra set of bits, which actually captures more detail in the dynamic range. So instead of having this is getting into bit depth and
just
also,
cover it quickly. But you're doing great. You're doing good.
But yeah, on a say like a CD is 16-bit, and then you have Pro Tools, like the older versions, they wouldn't go any higher than 24-bit,
right?
Because that's the maximum dynamic range, and it's already beyond that of a human ear. Now, when they go above that for floating point is where they actually have levels in between, which is more analog than 16 or 24-bit. And that's when it says 32-bit floating point. Although, to make things more confusing, I noticed that Pro Tools and some of the other plugins also have like 48-bit, but it's not floating point. It's just extra dynamic range that it does internally. And because it does that internally, you really don't need to think about it unless you're moving the faders, because I've read some articles where they were explaining on how that works, and really it just means it allows you to take that master fader in Pro Tools and bring it down if you're clipping, and you're not losing any information.
Got it. All right, so this is what I understood. The 32-bit float is, and that's what the universal audio processor uses?
Yes.
Okay.
32-bit floating point.
Okay.
For the audio. That was one of the things I was reading that found fascinating. But then everybody started going to 64-bit, but that's computer. So like
Right.
you have all these bits for different things here, and I can see why it's confusing to everybody.
Right.
But,
So the 32-bit float is good because, like you said, it's even higher resolution than, let's say, 24-bit audio. So it'll take, let's say you record something in 24-bit, right? Mm-hmm. And then you want to apply the Universal Audio, the LA2A plugin. So the 24-bit signal gets sent out through a USB, right, into your UAD2, which is the external processor. And within that processor, it sort of it takes that 24-bit signal and sort of transforms it into an even higher resolution version, and then it does the processing, and then it sends it back, right?
That's correct.
All right. There you go. That's not too hard to understand. And that's why it sounds better, right?
Yeah, that's why it sounds better. And but not to sound totally geeky, but I was even talking to some of the guys that do plugins like that, and you can get, there's a whole industry in and of itself just emulating equipment, like emulating analog equipment right down to the component.
Oh, whoa.
Like yeah, whereas like, oh, we'll have it emulate the sound of this this bulging capacitor in the circuit.
Yeah. There's like a million capacitors and transistors, and they're literally trying to model like each one.
Yeah,
Wow.
you usually run into that a lot with those, especially with the guitar amp sims, especially the ones today.
Oh.
But the trade-off is that they take a lot more processing, even for the UAD. In fact, I have one guitar amp sim that emulates the limited edition ENGL guitar full stack, but I only have enough UAD processing power to maybe run one at a time.
Wow. So how much do these the UAD1 or the UAD2, what do they go for in round numbers?
Probably about $400, give or take.
Okay.
And it also depends upon which ones you get now, because the UAD Solo that I have, they no longer make or sell anymore. But now they have ones where you can plug it in through Thunderbolt, or and there's also Apollos where they have the processing in the interface. And those can be USB or Thunderbolt, depending upon which one you get.
Right.
But you go with the ones with the more processing power, or the Apollos. The Apollos, I think, are about $700, and just getting the cards for the UADs that have more than the processing power of a Solo usually start running upwards of $800 to, or even somewhere they're thousands of dollars. But they come with vouchers for plugins from their store too.
Yeah, I know I priced one of the 8 XLR input, whatever, Apollo from Universal Audio, and I think it was $3,000. But I mean, that must be like serious. That's a serious unit, and that's the one that does, as we've mentioned on the show before, where the actual mic pre's in it can emulate the classic mic pre's, and it can run all the processing power of a lot of the plugins at the same time and do all that. So I think that's sort of like, eventually I might want to get something like that, but definitely overkill for podcasting. Definitely.
Yeah. Once you're in that realm, you better be doing something more than podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, unless
that's like bringing a rocket launcher to a knife fight.
Oh, I'm telling you. So that's cool. So do you run both the UAD1 and the UAD2 at the same time?
It depends. Usually in my musical projects, I am using both, but for the most part, the workhorse is the UAD2.
Okay.
And it's mainly due to a software thing because it's mainly with UAD where their software support ends at a certain version for the UAD1. So updating, I would actually lose a lot of the UAD1 only plugins, and one of them that I use a lot is the Nigel Amp sim. So, and then of course I wouldn't be able to run any plugins on the UAD1 anyways. So that one's an older version, but then on the laptop that I have the UAD Solo, that's the only one I can use for the laptop, and that one is the one that's running it's running the latest version or the semi-latest version. In fact, I haven't upgraded in about a year, but there's no point because I don't have any of the newer plugins. In fact, I think that amp sim I was talking about was probably the newest plugin I have.
Interesting. And that's an amp sim. That's an amp like a guitar amp simulator.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect for metal. The ENGL.
Man. But wait, do you play guitar too? I thought you play keyboards. That's your main instrument, right? Or synths?
Keyboards is my main instrument, but I've always had my start in guitar.
Oh.
In fact, I play all kinds of instruments, and I have my own solo projects where I play all the instruments. I sequence the drums, but you listen to them, they sound like a real drummer because of the plugins that I'm using. But if I was a better drummer, I probably would go in the studio and actually do it myself. But
right?
that's for when you have a lot of time and budget to put into a project like that.
Yeah, that's difficult to get good drum takes and perform it live and all that. So let's get to the audiobooks. You're helping folks record audiobooks. Just overview that process real quick. How do you do that?
Well, it really depends upon the client. If the client is a published author and they want to have me make their book into an audiobook, there's usually a conversation that I have with them based on where we talk about the book. If they're planning on narrating it, usually I would have to give them an honest answer whether that would be a good idea or not. Sometimes it's not that they are a bad speaker. Other times it's just the time and availability that they have. Because if the author is doing their own narration, they're in there in the studio while they're doing all the narration. If they're not doing their narration, they're actually able to write future books or do other things than just spend the time narrating. So that's the advantage that has. And also, and I usually do this because I do a lot more fiction than I do nonfiction. Is that we have a professional voice actor in the studio to do the narration. But again, acting as a producer, I make the decision on what type of voice to go with, unless that is a major concern with the author or rights holder, as some of us like to say, who wants to have the final say. If they want the final say on that, then fine, as long as they're paying for the production.
Right. So now talk to me about recording. You said you have a voice actor in the studio. Where is that? Are you there? Is it local to you or is it somewhere else?
All kinds. Most of the ones that I'm doing are local, but there's actually one coming up that we're doing the last 3 in the series called The Wicked Witches of the Midwest. Huh. We've been pretty much doing the whole series on this, and now that we've done 6, we just started pre-production on book 7, and this time our voice actor is actually traveling the world and is in Thailand. Huh. So then we're hammering out the logistics and booking studio time in places like that to be able to record her while it's over there. And because she's in Southeast Asia, the prices for studio time are a lot cheaper than in Tampa. So it's one major advantage with it. Just it might make up for itself when it comes to headaches and logistics.
Right.
But for those, as long as the internet connection is good, I will be running the session remotely, where I'll be here, and there's about a 12-hour time difference between here and there. So when it's day, it's night over there.
Right.
I'll just be running it through, say, like Skype or something, where I'm just doing my typical thing that I do when I'm sitting through the studio, where I'm marking areas that need to be done, and then I also give the narrator feedback if they need to go over another part.
Got it. So then after it's all recorded, you get the audio files, and then I guess you just pop them into Audition and go through your timestamps of the things that you wanted to edit?
If it comes to that, usually it's much more efficient if I'm marking them as they're going through, which is why I like to keep them in the same session. In fact, it's one of the things I'm begrudgingly having to deal with, and I wish Adobe Audition would find a way to fix, is that once you get over, say, like, I guess, 500 markers, right around that time, it starts to really bog down the processing of it. So then it starts to slow down in response time. I don't run into this problem in Pro Tools, but I'm beginning to find that it's with all these different versions of Pro Tools that we're using, it's becoming more difficult to remain consistent. So if the studio has Adobe Audition, at least I know there's not going to be any difference unless they're using a super old version, but that's not a problem because I have the Creative Cloud, which is the latest version.
Right.
It's always harder to take the newer version and go open it on a older version of the DAW because sometimes you get compatibility issues.
Right.
Especially with Adobe's software, you open it with software that is too old, it may not let you open it at all.
Right. All right, so you got it in your DAW and you're editing it, and then you just mix it down and level it same way as you do a podcast, right?
Probably a little more precise. Like I guess the way I can explain it is that editing a podcast, you can keep it real, you can keep it loose and natural. Audiobook, 10 times more anal about it. Like listening to it, and every little background noise, every little mouth noise, I'm either deciding whether to cut it out or minimize it. And then on top of that, I pay very close attention to the voice actor's performance of it. See if I think that's a good enough performance. In fact, I act more like a director in that sense, where I'm paying attention to their performance. And I even do this when I'm recording them. I pay close attention to how they're performing it, and if I could think of a better way they can do it, I would immediately let them know, put a marker, and have them do it that way.
That's interesting. Actually, Barry, who's here with me, he actually sat in on one of the recording sessions you did with one of your authors. And Barry, what did that session sound like with Roy and the author? You know, with Roy producing the author and directing the author.
And they were cussing up a storm. Profanities left, profanities right.
Really? Profanities left, profanities right?
Every second word was a F word.
Oh, every second word. Man.
Oh, yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Oh.
I think that was when we were when we were running behind schedule.
Roy through Skype to Thailand. All right. Well, so then you just, mix it down, and obviously you level it to. Did you level it to the same standard as a podcast? Like, I guess an audiobook would be mono, though, right?
Yeah, in most cases it is mono, but recently we started just going to stereo because it was creating too much of a lag in our production process. Because because Audition is ideally meant for doing film audio, where it's usually stereo or 5.1. And all the time when we try and go to mono, it adds another step in the process, and it would be to just keep it stereo. So from book 4 on, and most of the productions now, I just keep it in stereo unless it has to be mono.
That's interesting, right? It's just easier to leave it in stereo. I like that.
Yeah, and it's something to keep in mind for podcasters, especially if their podcasts aren't really long. However, if they start going beyond 15, 20 minutes and they have a limit to how large the files can be, I know WordPress likes to keep it under 32 megs unless you set it differently, which is beyond most of our level of expertise, but you can actually have the amount of space the file takes by having it as mono rather than stereo.
Right. Cuts it down in half. So this has been awesome, Roy. What else did we not discuss?
Wow. Well, we could take all day.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Why? What are you thinking?
Well, I was also thinking about condensers and dynamics, but I know that was one of the things that I just reminded myself back in Podfest, that Mark is very knowledgeable about dynamics. In fact, he tells a lot of people that he's more knowledgeable about dynamic mics than condenser mics. Well, a lot of my knowledge of condenser mics are usually to the big numbers of like the Neumann UAD7s and the some of the bigger name mics.
Right.
But yeah, when it comes to podcasting, those are just a little bit excessive and probably would create more problems than they would fix.
Yeah, big, awesome vocal mic like large diaphragm condensers, the classic ones. We'll have to, you know what? I'll have you back sometime, and maybe we could like go over like the classic condensers or something. Ooh, that's a good title. That's a good name for a title of an episode.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm totally down for that.
Yeah, let's do that next time, because I mean, it's interesting, and there's a lot to learn there. You know what I mean? It's like, again, it's just general knowledge. I mean, a lot of people who listen to this show are fully aware that like everything we talk about is not exactly necessary knowledge. Like it's not, 1,000% practical right now in your daily life, but it's just general knowledge. It's all around knowledge, and all these little bits of knowledge, add up in your mind, and they actually make connections with each other, and that's how you become really knowledgeable, and you can walk into any situation and handle it, right? That's how it works.
Yeah, much more likely to be able to MacGyver something if you're in a tight spot. In fact, there is that was actually making me think of some situations where I know this happens a lot in the industry, not just podcasting, where there's some equipment where it's treated as the gold standard, and then you look into the history of it. It was just meant for this small feature or a small thing, and it wasn't meant to be perfect. It was just meant to be useful, and then people are just bowing down to it as if it's the ultimate.
Right. Yeah. So much of podcasting is just it's like when something works, it's like, okay, this works good. Everyone get that. And, for the most part, it's fine, right? Because most people who are podcasting and everything, like they need to keep it simple, and they should keep it simple. Just find something solid, something that sounds good, some process or workflow, microphone, some setup that sounds good, and then, it doesn't have to be expensive, and then just go with that. Totally practical.
Yeah, you don't need a 747 every time you need to fly to New York.
That's right. I'm waiting for the drones that can carry like a human, like you just get in like a little buggy, just like a little mini helicopter.
Well, they're getting there. In fact, they probably have an easier time building a plane drone than cars that drive themselves. At least they don't have to worry about obstacles like a car would.
Right? All right, here's the word daisy in different languages.
Marguerite.
Daisy.
Margarita.
Margarita.
Gänseblümchen.
This is the word ambulance.
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 Ambulanza.
Ambulancia.
Krankenwagen.
Der Krankenwagen.
All right, I just love that. And if you go back and listen to how I described it first before I found it, what a horrible description of it. That was bad. Anyway, Roy Stegman, the complete audio producer. That's your show. That's your website, completeaudioproducer.com. Audiobooks. And also, next time you come on, Roy, you need to play either some keys or some synths or a guitar or something. And I can actually
do one of each or all three.
You could do all three, and I actually have a drum set right here, so maybe I could just play a beat, and then you can just, we can jam.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that
hopefully
never works.
it'll all be in sync.
Well, the thing is,
latency.
if I just play a beat and just keep going, and then you play like let's say keys or a guitar over it to what you hear, definitely in the recording it'll be out of sync, but then I can slide the audio in the recording and line it up so it syncs.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but it's still a bad idea. I mean, it's not a good idea. So, all right, Roy Stegman, thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem, Chris.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun in Florida, and it's been great. And thank you for listening. I know you learned a lot from this. And again, if you listen every week, you'll just pick up all sorts of knowledge. I know we go deep sometimes on this show. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we stay right on the surface, and that's awesome. But sometimes we go deep, and it's just really good all-around knowledge. We'll be back next week with the next session. Until then, you know what to do. Roy, you know what to tell them.
Yeah.
Do we have to wait for the music to kick in now? Oh, here we go. Sound great! Yeah!
away from me well, and you can play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control well, it's quite a feeling, isn't it? They're floating, drifting down now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. You react some empathy. You change your attitude well. You say I just don't get it now. You say your eyes so far away now. You gave up on me well, so change your game and give away. You say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now, it's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. You react so angry. I want you to know you will ever always be true. I've gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold their meaning. And doesn't mean it's still the same. You're pushing me away. You worked your theories now where you're getting worked up on you now. You work your way around somehow now. Yes, it hurts me now where that you don't talk to me enough. Now that these worlds have split apart now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I